Before I tell you what happened, you need to understand one thing. The day my father called trading the hobby of men too afraid to build something real was the exact day a stranger quietly started buying shares of our company. Nobody connected those two events. Not my father. Not my brother. Not our board of directors. And certainly not the investors celebrating another record year. I was the only one who noticed. Not because I was smarter than everyone else. Because I had spent 14 years studying the one language they refused to learn. The language of markets. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my life my family believed I had wasted my education staring at charts on computer screens. They were wrong. Charts never lied. People did. If someone had walked into Carter Steel Industries that spring morning and told my father his youngest son would soon become the only reason the company still carried our family name, he would have laughed so hard the entire boardroom would have joined him. He didn't hate me. That would have been easier. He simply believed I had chosen a meaningless life. My father respected people who built factories, hired workers, and created products you could touch with your hands. He believed wealth came from steel, concrete, and machines. I believed wealth came from understanding risk before everyone else even realized it existed. For years, those two beliefs lived under the same roof. Eventually, only one of them survived. Carter Steel Industries stood just outside Cleveland and had been part of our family for almost 50 years. My grandfather started the business with one rented warehouse, 2 welding machines, and 6 employees after returning from Vietnam. My father, William Carter, transformed it into one of the largest privately owned steel component manufacturers in the Midwest. Construction companies, mining firms, railroads, and energy corporations all bought our products. Nearly 1,200 employees depended on that business. Around town, my father wasn't just successful. He was respected. Teachers shook his hand. Politicians invited him to charity dinners. Young entrepreneurs asked him for advice. Whenever people mentioned his name, they almost always said the same sentence. That man built an empire. Growing up, I believed every word. Then I discovered that even empires could become blind. My older brother, Ryan, was everything my father wanted. Confident. Aggressive. Charismatic. He loved negotiations. Loved expansion. Loved talking about market share and billion-dollar opportunities. By the time he was 25, everyone already assumed he would become CEO one day. Nobody questioned it. Including me. I wasn't interested in running the company. At least, not then. While Ryan spent weekends touring factories with Dad, I spent mine inside the public library reading books that nobody else borrowed. Behavioral finance. Market psychology. Risk management. Economic history. I wasn't fascinated by money. I was fascinated by decisions. Why did people panic? Why did intelligent investors buy bubbles they secretly knew would burst? Why did fear spread faster than facts? Those questions mattered more to me than stock prices themselves. When I was 16, my math teacher challenged our class to invest imaginary money in the stock market for one semester. Most students picked famous companies. I picked businesses whose financial statements nobody bothered reading. I finished first. Not because every investment worked. Because I avoided most of the bad ones. That lesson stayed with me. Making money wasn't the hardest part. Keeping it was. My first real trading account contained $4,000 I earned repairing old pickup trucks with a neighbor. 6 months later. It was worth $2,800. Most people would have quit. Instead, I printed every losing trade. Every mistake. Every emotional decision. I taped them above my desk. Every morning I forced myself to look at them before opening a chart. Failure became my teacher long before success ever introduced itself. When I graduated with a degree in finance, my father expected me to join Carter Steel. I did. Not because I wanted to. Because I still believed earning his respect mattered. Ryan became vice president of operations. I became a financial analyst buried inside the accounting department. It wasn't glamorous. But numbers didn't care about job titles. Every morning I reviewed company reports. Every evening I studied global markets. My routine never changed. Wake up before sunrise. Review Asian markets. Exercise. Work 10 hours. Study charts until midnight. Sleep. Repeat. Friends stopped inviting me out. Relationships quietly ended. Vacations became charts on a second monitor. People called it obsession. I called it preparation. The market punishes people who arrive unprepared. 3 years passed. Then 5. Then 8. Slowly, almost invisibly, my trading account began growing. Not because I discovered secret indicators. Not because I predicted every move. Because I became painfully boring. I stopped chasing excitement. I accepted small wins. I cut losses quickly. I waited. Patience sounds ordinary until you realize how few people actually possess it. By the time I turned 30, my investments quietly produced more income than my salary ever could. Nothing about my life changed. I still drove the same old truck. Still lived in a modest apartment. Still wore inexpensive clothes. Nobody noticed. That anonymity became my greatest advantage. People rarely question someone they underestimate. My father certainly didn't. Whenever someone asked what I did, he smiled politely. Ethan works in accounting. Then, after a short pause, he usually added. He also spends far too much time trading. The conversations always ended the same way. Polite laughter. A few jokes about gambling. Then everyone moved on. Eventually, I stopped defending myself. Results don't need arguments. They need time. Everything changed during the company's annual leadership conference. Every executive, department manager, and major shareholder gathered inside a downtown hotel ballroom. Nearly 300 people attended. My father loved those events. He walked across the stage without notes, speaking about discipline, loyalty, and growth. He spoke about expanding into international markets. He announced plans to build another manufacturing facility in Texas. The room applauded. Ryan smiled proudly beside him. Everything looked perfect. Until the final question. One investor stood near the back of the room. Mr. Carter. My father smiled. Yes? Will both of your sons eventually help lead the company? He didn't hesitate. Ryan has earned that responsibility. Applause filled the room. The investor nodded. And Ethan? For a brief moment. Our eyes met. Then my father laughed. Not nervously. Confidently. Ethan has different talents. The audience chuckled. He believes fortunes are made watching computer screens. More laughter. My father shook his head. I've always believed one simple thing. He looked directly at me. Markets reward luck. Businesses reward responsibility. The applause was louder than before. I forced a smile. Inside. Something quietly changed. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Acceptance. For years I had been trying to convince him trading required discipline. That afternoon, I realized he had already decided who I was. Nothing I said would ever change it. Only reality could. The conference ended. Executives celebrated another successful year. Champagne flowed. Photographers captured smiling faces. Everyone talked about the future. Nobody noticed the man standing alone near one of the large windows. I did. He wasn't drinking. He wasn't networking. He wasn't speaking. He simply watched. His badge identified him as a representative from Northbridge Capital. That was strange. Northbridge wasn't one of our investors. I walked over. Beautiful event. He smiled politely. It certainly is. I don't think we've met. We haven't. I'm Ethan. I know. That surprised me. You do? He nodded once. I know everyone in the Carter family. Something about his tone made me uncomfortable. What brings Northbridge here? He looked toward my father before answering. Curiosity. About what? Strong companies. Then he excused himself. The conversation lasted less than a minute. I forgot about it. At least, I thought I had. 3 weeks later I was reviewing unusual market activity before work. Old habits die slowly. I tracked steel prices every morning. Iron ore futures. Shipping costs. Currency movements. And occasionally, public filings involving companies connected to our industry. One filing immediately caught my attention. A small investment fund had quietly purchased 2.4% of Carter Steel Industries' publicly traded preferred shares. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed who financed the purchase. Northbridge Capital. I searched again. Another filing appeared. Different investment fund. Different company name. Same financing source. Then another. And another. Individually, the purchases meant almost nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. Someone was buying pieces of Carter Steel without announcing they were connected. A normal investor buys directly. Professionals hide. My heartbeat slowed. Whenever my pulse slowed instead of speeding up, I knew something deserved attention. That afternoon I visited Ryan's office. He barely looked up from his laptop. Need something? I've been reviewing ownership filings. So? I think someone is quietly building a position. Ryan laughed. Welcome to capitalism. I'm serious. So am I. He leaned back. Investors buy shares every day. Not like this. He shrugged. We're performing well. People want exposure. Ethan. His voice became softer. Not everything is a conspiracy. Maybe he was right. Maybe I had spent too many years looking for patterns. Markets could make anyone paranoid if they weren't careful. Still, something refused to leave my mind. That evening I searched every filing from the previous 6 months. The deeper I looked, the stranger everything became. 7 different investment firms. Different names. Different addresses. Different executives. Every one of them financed through Northbridge. No headlines mentioned it. No financial news discussed it. No analyst asked questions. Which meant one thing. Almost nobody had noticed. Including our board. I printed every document. Placed them inside a folder. The next morning I asked my father's assistant for 10 minutes of his time. She smiled apologetically. He's busy. It's important. So is everything else today. I waited anyway. Almost an hour later his office door opened. He waved me inside. What is it? I placed the folder on his desk. I think someone is quietly buying influence in the company. He looked confused. What? I explained everything. The filings. The financing. The ownership structure. The shell funds. He listened patiently. Then closed the folder without reading another page. Ethan. I appreciate your concern. But this isn't trading. This is business. I stared at him. They're connected. No. He smiled. You're seeing charts where there are only people. I took a slow breath. I'm asking you to investigate. We have lawyers. We have bankers. We have advisors. If there were a problem, they'd already know. I realized the conversation was over. As I stood to leave, he said something almost casually. You spend too much time expecting markets to explain everything. I nodded. And you spend too little. He looked surprised. For the first time in years, I had answered back. I walked out before he could respond. Outside his office, Harold Mason, our chief financial officer, had apparently heard enough to understand what happened. He quietly stopped beside me. You really believe someone's buying control? I don't know. But I know disciplined investors never spend hundreds of millions by accident. Harold looked toward my father's office. Then back at me. Keep watching. Those two words stayed with me. Because 6 days later, Northbridge Capital made a move so quiet, so ordinary, that almost everyone dismissed it as routine market activity. Everyone. Except me. I opened the filing at 5:12 that morning. By 5:15, I knew my father was running out of time. Northbridge hadn't bought another large block of shares. That would have attracted attention. Instead, they had done something far more dangerous. They had purchased debt. Most people watch stock prices. Professionals watch debt. Because debt tells you who owns tomorrow. I downloaded every filing I could find. Corporate bonds. Convertible notes. Credit agreements. Everything pointed in the same direction. Northbridge wasn't trying to become another investor. They were positioning themselves to become our lender. If they controlled enough debt. One missed covenant. One bad quarter. One technical default. And they wouldn't need to buy the company. They could take it. Quietly. Legally. I called Harold before sunrise. I need to see you. His voice sounded unusually serious. I was about to call you. An hour later we met inside a small diner almost 30 miles from headquarters. Neither of us touched our coffee. I slid the documents across the table. Harold read the first page. Then the second. Then he slowly removed his glasses. I was afraid of this. You already knew? I suspected. But suspicion isn't evidence. He tapped the papers. This is. My stomach tightened. How bad is it? He looked out the window before answering. They don't want our factories. They don't want our products. They want our customers. And our contracts. If they control the debt, they control the negotiations. I leaned forward. How much time? Harold hesitated. Less than anyone thinks. That afternoon an emergency board meeting was announced. Nobody explained why. Executives whispered in hallways. Department managers suddenly canceled vacations. Outside consultants filled conference rooms. The atmosphere inside Carter Steel changed overnight. By evening my father finally called me. It wasn't a request. Come to the boardroom. When I arrived, every seat was occupied. Board members. Outside attorneys. Investment bankers. Ryan sat beside my father with a confidence that looked forced. The room felt heavy. My father stood. For 49 years? Our company has overcome every challenge. This one will be no different. One banker cleared his throat. I'm afraid that's no longer accurate. The room became silent. He connected his laptop to the projector. A single chart appeared. Our primary lending syndicate has sold nearly 60% of our outstanding corporate debt. My father frowned. To whom? The banker clicked again. The Northbridge logo filled the screen. Nobody spoke. Ryan broke the silence. So? The banker looked directly at him. So they now hold enough leverage to force renegotiation if your financial performance weakens. We're profitable. For now. Another slide appeared. Steel demand had declined. Shipping costs had increased. Energy prices had risen. Construction orders had slowed. Individually, none of those numbers were catastrophic. Together, they created pressure. Exactly the kind of pressure Northbridge had been waiting for. My father slowly turned toward me. For the first time, he didn't dismiss my opinion. What aren't we seeing? Every eye in the room shifted toward me. I stood. They're not buying a company. They're buying timing. Several directors looked confused. I continued. If our lenders panic first, we lose negotiating power. If suppliers panic, we lose production. If customers panic, we lose contracts. But if none of them panic, Northbridge has nothing. Silence. Harold smiled slightly. Exactly. Ryan crossed his arms. Fine. So what's your brilliant solution? I didn't answer immediately. Markets had taught me one lesson above every other. Never reveal your position before understanding everyone else's. Instead, I asked a question. What percentage of our debt matures within 18 months? Harold answered. 43%. Cash reserves? 89 million. Available credit? Almost exhausted. I nodded. Then looked toward my father. How much cash would restore confidence? The banker answered first. If the balance sheet improves significantly, lenders won't have a reason to accelerate anything. And suppliers? They'll continue normal terms. Customers? They'll stay. Ryan laughed. So where do you plan on finding $200 million? Nobody answered. Because everyone knew banks wouldn't move quickly enough. Private equity would demand control. Selling factories would destroy production. Every option came with a price the company couldn't survive. I quietly placed a dark folder on the table. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't thick. It contained fewer than 20 pages. But those pages represented 14 years of discipline. My father looked confused. What is that? My portfolio. Ryan smirked. Ethan. This isn't the time. It is. I opened the folder. Audited brokerage statements. Investment partnerships. Treasury holdings. Private equity positions. Tax filings. Every document independently verified. Harold reached for the first page. His eyebrows lifted. Then higher. Without saying a word, he slid the folder toward my father. My father read slowly. Once. Then again. His hands began to shake. This. He swallowed. This can't be right. It is. Ryan grabbed the papers. His confidence disappeared before he reached the final page. You've. He looked at me in disbelief. You've built this? One trade at a time. The room remained silent. For 14 years nobody had asked how I afforded the same truck. The same apartment. The same clothes. Because nobody believed there was anything worth asking. I never corrected them. Wealth grows best when nobody expects it. One director finally spoke. Your liquid assets alone. He couldn't finish the sentence. I did. Are enough to stabilize the company. My father stared at me. Why didn't you tell us? Because every time I tried to explain trading, you called it gambling. He closed his eyes. The room felt smaller. Not because of money. Because of regret. Harold finally asked the question everyone feared. Would you invest? I looked through the boardroom windows. Hundreds of employees moved across the production floor below. Welders. Engineers. Forklift operators. Maintenance crews. People who had spent decades building something larger than themselves. They weren't responsible for executive mistakes. Yet they would suffer first. I turned back toward the table. I will. Relief spread across several faces. Then I continued. But not without conditions. Ryan sighed. Here we go. I ignored him. No layoffs caused by executive decisions. Harold nodded immediately. Agreed. Executive bonuses are suspended. No objections. The corporate aircraft is sold. Ryan started speaking. My father raised his hand. He's right. Silence returned. No new acquisitions. No luxury spending. Every available dollar strengthens the balance sheet. The directors exchanged glances. One by one. They agreed. Finally. I looked directly at my father. My last condition. He met my eyes. You step down as CEO. Nobody moved. Ryan stood so quickly his chair nearly fell. Absolutely not. My father slowly raised his hand again. He never looked away from me. Explain. You built this company. You protected it for decades. But right now, they need someone making decisions for the future. Not protecting the past. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then my father did something I never imagined seeing. He nodded. If that's what saves 1,200 families, I'll do it. Ryan stared at him. Dad. It's over. No. It's beginning. 3 days later the announcement shocked the market. William Carter retired. Harold Mason became interim CEO. I invested enough capital to eliminate the immediate liquidity crisis. Banks withdrew acceleration notices within 48 hours. Suppliers restored normal credit terms. Customers renewed long-term contracts. Northbridge's strategy collapsed almost overnight. Without fear. Their leverage disappeared. 2 weeks later they quietly sold most of their position. No headlines called it a victory. No television cameras appeared outside the factory. The world moved on. But inside Carter Steel, everything had changed. Months later I walked through the original warehouse where my grandfather had started the business. Dust covered the old machines. Rust marked the first welding table. My father stood alone near the back wall. He wasn't wearing a suit. Just old work clothes. For the first time in years, he looked like the young man in the photographs hanging inside our headquarters. He held a small wooden box. I've been waiting. He handed it to me. Inside was an old pocket watch. Its back carried an engraving. To the one who protects the future, not his pride. I looked up. I've never seen this. It belonged to your grandfather. He wanted the person who saved the company to have it. My throat tightened. He thought this might happen? My father smiled sadly. He always said the greatest danger to a family business isn't competition. It's ego. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, he looked at me. I owe you something. You don't owe me anything. Yes. I do. He took a slow breath. I spent years believing building factories made me wise. I confused experience with certainty. I judged your career because I didn't understand it. His voice became quieter. I wasn't afraid of trading. I was afraid of becoming irrelevant. Those words surprised me more than any apology could. He wasn't defending himself anymore. He was telling the truth. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have listened. For years I had imagined that moment. I thought it would erase everything. It didn't. But it gave both of us something better. A chance to move forward." A year later, Carter Steel reported its healthiest financial position in over a decade. Growth returned. Slowly. Carefully. No reckless expansion. No unnecessary debt. Every investment had one simple question attached to it. What happens if we're wrong? That question alone saved millions. Ryan also changed. He stayed with the company, but not as CEO. He spent 2 years rebuilding supplier relationships and personally visiting factories he had once managed from conference rooms. One evening he walked into my office carrying 2 coffees. "I used to think confidence meant never admitting mistakes." He smiled. "Turns out confidence is admitting them before someone else pays the price." We laughed. It was the first genuine conversation we'd had in years. People still ask me what the best trade of my career was. They expect me to mention a stock, a commodity, a market crash. I always disappoint them. The greatest trade I ever made wasn't buying something cheap and selling it higher. It was refusing to let pride become more valuable than people. Markets rise. Markets fall. Money comes. Money goes. But trust compounds exactly the same way disciplined investing does. Slowly. Patiently. One decision at a time. Every morning when I walk through Carter Steel and hear the sound of machines starting another shift, I'm reminded that real wealth was never the number on my brokerage statement. Real wealth was knowing that 1,200 people still had somewhere to come to work on Monday morning. And every time someone tells me trading is just another form of gambling, I simply smile. Because I learned something the market taught me years ago. Luck might win a single trade. But only discipline can protect a legacy.